Counter.
And welcome back to Pharmaceutical Soccer right here on 102.5 The Game. Clay Trainum joined again by Valair Shabila. We have a special guest for this segment. His first time in the pharmacy, the commentator for Nashville SC, massively well known as a commentator in England, but maybe not as well known as a cricketer for the University of Bournemouth about a lifetime ago. The one, the only, Tony Husband. Welcome to the pharmacy.
Hey, Clay, thank you so much for the welcome, and great to be with you and Valair. And goodness me, my cricket career feels so long ago. I think it was actually in a previous century. It actually was.
Well, how many centuries did you have in this previous century?
Oh, not many. I only ever hit one century in cricket. I mean, it's quite a challenge to get to get what we call a ton in cricket. I did manage it once. In a game against BBC Wales, playing for my old BBC station. We went down across the border into Wales and we came away with a win, and I got 102, I think, on that occasion. But my proudest Bournemouth moment, though, was we played Oxford University, and Oxford, one of the top universities, obviously not just academically, but in terms of sporting prowess. We played Oxford University at cricket, and here we were, a little kind of Bournemouth University. And I did manage to get 50, which is a half century, which is pretty good in cricket terms. And that's probably one of my best cricketing moments, was a half century against Oxford University. It was the scratchiest 50 runs you'll ever see anybody score. I think I was actually dropped by one guy, the easiest catch you'll ever get. He dropped it. And I was also bowled, but it was a no ball, so it doesn't count. So
you need luck sometimes.
I got luck that day, I can tell you.
I'm a little bit, so I'm just happy that there's another cricket fan on here because I do like cricket, but I was a little bit surprised you didn't bring up, I think there was something with Shane Warne at some point that popped up.
Yes. Well spotted, Clay. Hey, look, we can talk 20 minutes on me playing against Shane Warne if you want. But no, that was, and in fact, because that was a filming job that we did in my old job. And yeah, we got the opportunity to face kind of the most famous bowler in cricket. So I mean, I'm trying to think of kind of a baseball analogy. If you're up against Clayton Kershaw or somebody like that, and you get a chance to bat against them. And so they said, come and do this. I faced 6 balls from Shane Warne, and he didn't get me out, which I was very pleased about, considering that he's the greatest leg spinner ever to play international cricket, and very, very good fun to have a bit of social time around as well. I must say that.
Yeah. And to all of our listeners who are confused, I am just as confused as you are, but Clay has the biggest smile on his face because he's been waiting for this moment, this entire show.
I have a chance to talk about cricket. The World Cup's going on right now. Why wouldn't I bring it up?
Absolutely. Yeah. ICC, the men's 2020 World Cup. 2020 is the game. If cricket's ever going to catch on in the States, 2020 is the way it will. I still think they might need to shorten it a bit. 10-10 would probably be better. And then it would be, closer to kind of, 6 innings each baseball match or something like that. But no, hey, that's great to get the cricket in. Very impressed with that, Clay. Wasn't expecting that at all.
Well, we just want to catch you off guard before we get talking about, obviously, Nashville Soccer Club. This is a little bit probably different sort of setup than what you normally deal with in terms of like Nashville media. This show is run by supporters. We're all very active supporters. We kind of come at it from a supporter perspective. And so I imagine for you, coming from, a BBC background and stuff like that, not only are you coming to Nashville having to learn a lot about Major League Soccer, you're having to learn about the culture of a club. While the MLS team did start, it's in its second year. This club's been around for 8, and trying to find the places to like fit that in, trying to find the culture of the city. Like, what has that process been like for you?
I'm really glad you asked that, Clay, because it's really interesting. And by the way, I do listen to you guys. So I enjoy the banter and the conversation and the fun. And I enjoy listening to your opinions about how you think the team is doing and what you think is right and what you think is wrong. Because you guys, let's not pretend that everybody working in a broadcast perspective is the definitive expert on a team. I'm as interested to know your opinions about the team as anybody's. And it's interesting to say about learning about a new culture and a new league. And this came about very quickly for me, the opportunity to come over to Nashville. So I didn't have a lot of time early in 2020 to kind of think, right, I'm going to go for this. Let's get over there. Then the pandemic came along and I was stranded. We were stranded back at home, my wife and I. And for 3 months, would go out for a walk during the daytime just to kind of, just clear my head or whatever and think, when on earth are we going to be making this move to Nashville? When's the world going to return to normal? And a guy did a podcast series called 25 Stories that made Major League Soccer. And he told the stories of the league going right back to the kind of birth of the league or the idea of the league, which really came off the back of the 1984 Olympics. And I would walk around my English kind of country village and I listened to all 24 of the 25 episodes. And then I listened to the 25th episode, walking around a park down in Wedgwood, Houston in Nashville, because by the 25th episode, I'd made it and we'd moved over to Nashville. So, that was a great opportunity to learn a bit about the history of the league. But then I needed to get to know a lot more about the club. And so I lent on Chris Jones a lot in that process. We spent time on Zoom calls where I was still back in England and just talking about, things that had happened in the past with the team, trying to, get myself to understand some of these rivalries. We were only talking, Tucker Hume and Big Bird a week or so ago, with that night in Cincinnati, and I love all that. And the one thing I wish I could have done, actually, if you could say, what would you have loved to do? I'd love it if we could wind the clock back and I could go and visit First Tennessee Park back in the USL days, come to a game, see the team play at the old stadium in USL, see them in Valair rods after the game. And Clay, I know we had a drink in Valair rods back earlier in the season. If I could wind the clock back, I'd love to go back and experience what that must have been like, because it was great fun in the very early days of the club as it was.
Yeah, I mean, the Von Elrods, for a lot of us supporters, like, that was a very important place. They're not a sponsor of the show, but if they would like to be, hit us up. But that was like our post-game spot. We got to know the team well. So, and one of the really cool things that we talked about on this show, back then, several years ago, when they signed Hani Mukhtar, when they brought him to meet the fans, like the selected few of us from the supporters groups, they brought him to Von Elrod's. Like, that was kind of important to us. But I remember, I want to say maybe it was during the tournament in Florida that unfortunately Nashville didn't participate in. You said something complimentary about like SC Cincinnati, and I sent you a message. I was like, just so you know, people in Nashville may get a little bit wound up about this. So now you've gotten to experience Nashville fans around a Cincy game. So I think you kind of get it a little bit more.
Yes, I do. I mean, definitely I'm aware of, that Cincinnati rivalry. And I know when we talked to Gary Smith, I think he feels a natural rivalry with Atlanta, obviously, as well, particularly with, the way they came into MLS and did so well. And I know that he absolutely loved that victory down there earlier this year, and that was a big one for him. But yeah, I mean, that's all part of that learning curve, isn't it? I mean, when I think back to what I didn't know kind of 18 months ago and what I know now, I mean, it's been a long journey. And it is, as a commentator, you immerse yourself in facts, figures, storylines anyway. And I mean, I've just kind of enjoyed, indulging myself in kind of learning everything I can in the time I've had about both the team and also the city. I mean, in the long days of winter, just to digress briefly, we didn't get a season underway till mid-April this year. The winter felt like a long winter, and I would go and wander around a still quite deserted Nashville, and I would see, whether it be the Bridgestone Arena or whether it be just Broadway and the entertainment district and all that, and I'd walk around this area and it was really quiet. And I had to imagine what Nashville is really like. I didn't know what it would be like. And then gradually, as the years gone on and things have got progressively better, I've seen the place come alive. And so that's been really special, actually, and really, really good fun to see.
Now, obviously, we really appreciate the research that you've done, because a lot of the stuff that we hear on the commentary or that we see you talk about is not stuff that comes out in a simple Google search. So it looks like somebody has done their homework, obviously. So we appreciate that. But I'm just curious, in terms of the move to the US, was that always something in the plans for you and the family, or is that just kind of came about and you had to take the opportunity?
No, Valair, good question. It absolutely was something I really was keen to do. I was so keen to do it that actually a few years ago, my wife and I, we went to New York, classic British tourist, 4-day shopping trip to New York. And while there, I squeezed it in with a little quick trip to Major League Soccer and just kind of arranged to say hello to a couple of people there, and just kind of said, if the opportunity ever kind of comes up, we'd seen Arlo White come across and do it with Seattle. Richard Fleming in Colorado. And Richard and I, he was with me at the BBC on the first day of my career in the BBC. So I knew him well anyway. And I just said, look, if things ever crop up, I would love to be just to have a chat. And then it was just one of those kind of coincidences in life where I bumped into John Champion in England at St Mary's Stadium doing Southampton against Tottenham on the 1st of January 2020. And it was really bumping into John, talking to him about his experiences coming over to work for ESPN. And that's what really led to me coming over to Nashville.
Weird story. I've been to a Tottenham match at St. Mary's around Christmas in 2013. And it was a winner from Emmanuel Adebayor, obviously a favorite of Valair. 3-2 win. He scored a brace after Southampton blew a 2-0 lead, which is about par for the course sometimes with Southampton, I imagine.
Oh, I saw plenty of Southampton implosions down the years, I'm afraid, and some really good times as well. But yes, 2013 players, good nominees, and Adebayor, good player that we watched down the years as well, and had some good days in red and white as well as the ones in white.
Fair enough.
But so I guess that's just kind of related to that. Now, obviously, in working in England, it's kind of a national coverage is the way that the league is approached. Like, you'll see different commentators kind of rotate through the channels, and you'll have different people doing different games. Whereas here, national television games aside, you're really embedded with the team the whole year. Has that been, I know you covered Southampton, but has that been a little bit different for you to get used to, kind of this sort of environment where you are seeing people from the club on a day-to-day basis in a job related context, not sort of a reporting related context?
Yeah, I've never been as embedded as I have been with this Nashville group, and obviously the access we get is way in excess to what you would get if you're working on the job in the UK. I'm not totally unused to it because, like you say, I did Southampton for BBC local radio kind of early in my career, and you do every game for them for the local, but that's a radio audience in that context. And of course, you're not employed by the club, so you're still separate. It's about what access you can get and what relationships you can build within that. But definitely, no, this has been like effectively going back to kind of being a bit more embedded and having the storyline of one team kind of continually and consistently going through your mind for a whole season. So it's been more like a readjustment to what I did before, because for about 13 years after I'd kind of stopped doing Southampton every game, I was more often just going to matches, and it was whichever two teams it happened to be. And it could be anything from Premier League down to, if you're covering the cup competitions, you could be one day turning up at a very small little non-league team, and reporting or commentating on a game there. So it's been different, but not something that I'm not unused to. Let's put it that way, having done a similar role in the UK with Southampton.
How do you think that that's sort of affected in the way that you get to know backstories and things that what the supporters care about more? Is it like different? Is it different, but in a better way, or is it just kind of different totally?
I think over here, the one thing that stands out to me is there is more emphasis on a kind of storytelling kind of aspect of things. People want to know the storylines, and you want to make stars of these players. I mean, these are the players that are stepping out there. Their Nissan Stadium has been their kind of Broadway show for the night, hasn't it? And I think I've been aware that you want to help grow these players as big individuals in the city. And I think that's something that's been important. And conversely as well, the other side of it, I think obviously you Americans love statistics, absolutely love statistics. And so, you know, in the UK, we don't go quite as big on every kind of stat. I'm not overly concerned about expected goals, and I laughed with Tim about this when I went on with him and Wes. You know, I'm happy to read Tim's expected goals, but I'm not necessarily going to be researching them myself. But the stats thing is always something that, you know, having grown up watching a lot of American sport, I know how important it is to be able to use that to help tell the story to the audience.
So with the access that you're kind of getting now with having NSC specifically, it's got to be a little harder for you to maybe, I don't want to say criticize, but maybe, you know, say certain things about a player who maybe made not the best play or something along those lines. So how do you balance that between giving the audience a true opinion on what's happening, but as well as not ruining those relationships with staff, players, because now you've built those relationships?
Yeah, and you know, there is a balance to be had, and you look at it from the point of view of, look, you've got to call the game the way you see the game, and you've got to be fair and balanced in doing so, and you've got to use objectivity to do that, because if you don't do that, then people will just see through it, you know, and you have to call it as you see it. And I'll say one thing about that. You know, I spoke to Mike Jacobs last year, and I spoke to Dax McCarty at one stage right at the beginning of this year. And I said to them both, look, there'll probably be occasions where we might say something in the course of a game that, you know, you're not going to like, you know, because we're calling the game as we see it. And we have to do that to be, you know, fair and truthful with the audience. And those guys have been absolutely superb. You know, you don't get, you know, any situations where there's any undue pressure to kind of, you know, water over something or paper over a crack or whatever. You know, they're really, really good in terms of, you know, they understand the role that Jamie Watson and I have, and that we have to call the game as we see it. The other thing as well about it is, you know, from my perspective, you just kind of keep a line, you know, embedded with the team to a certain extent. I've traveled with the team these last few months as well. But you kind of just keep a line there, because, you know, you've got to talk about these players. You've got to critique these players. When they make a mistake, you have to acknowledge that happens sometimes. And so it helps if you then don't get too close and too tight, and don't try and imagine that you're just I'm just one of the team. So you just keep a little line, a professional line there that is that, you know, I'll go and just sit there on the plane, and you guys, you know, enjoy whether it's a win at Cincinnati or whatever. But, you know, there's a time and a place for people like me to be, you know, involved in that kind of side of things. So it's something you're aware of, but it's also not something I was completely unused to, again, because when you do a lot of commentary around the world now for what they call these world feeds, quite often you might be employed by a federation or something like that and asked to provide the host commentary on an event. And so you're going to be doing that, bearing in mind that, you know, they are the paymasters ultimately. So you're going to be fair and objective, but you're also going to be conscious of, you know, who you're representing in doing the job as well.
And sort of along those lines, obviously you're trying your best to maintain objectivity, but you do travel with Nashville. You're behind the scenes with Nashville. You're employed by Nashville. So, like, what has been maybe your person, like the moment that has given you the most sort of joy or experience or whatever in your now almost 2 years covering the team? Like, what's the moment where you, like, it clicked in your head and you're like, okay, I'm in the right spot, I'm doing the right thing, and I can't wait to do the next game here after this has happened?
Well, you think back to last season, as strange as last season was, there were some highs that I didn't anticipate we would probably have. If you think back to the shellacking over Dallas with Daniel Rios's goal in that October, and at that point, I think we may have just been allowing a very small amount of fans back into the stadium, because those were some hard days, let's be fair, in that first season with no fans there. Really difficult. But I think the playoff run last season was something that I didn't see coming. I don't think anybody saw it necessarily coming when we look back to, say, February 2020 and the beginning of the adventure. So that was a really, really great moment. Winning in Toronto, we know what I mean, in Hartford that time. It was just, again, it was a shame it was in a kind of empty venue, but, you know, that has to go down as one of the great results of this team in Major League Soccer terms. to go to a club that has represented nothing but success in recent times in Major League Soccer, and to I felt, kind of start to chip away and actually start the process of knocking down a bit of an empire in Toronto FC, and to win that, and then actually to go to Columbus and not come too far away. There wasn't that much in that game, not a lot. So they got very close, unusually close in many ways, to the very top of the tree last year. And the question then, a lot of people said to me in the preseason this year was, well, what are they going to do this year? And that's a hard question in this league to know what a team is going to do. But I felt, well, they can get better and they will get better. But of course, in a league that's about playoffs, and you're one and done if you have a bad day in the playoffs, you can't necessarily be sure they're going to go higher. But then we've seen some magical moments this year. I think probably the highlight for me would be Hani Mukhtar's hat-trick against Chicago. To do that in, within the first 16 minutes of the game and in 6 minutes of game time, not something I'd seen too often. That was just a fantastic start to the game, destroyed Chicago in the process of just commanding the field. That was really, really a wonderful night. And seeing Hani Mukhtar's progress this year has also been one of the highlights. So probably that Chicago game would stand out from this year and Toronto from last year.
Certainly more so than the Chicago away match.
But yeah, I'm trying to forget that one. I think everybody probably would try to forget that one.
The one thing I will appreciate, and I'm sure Valair and our listeners will appreciate, the first two games you mentioned both included Daniel Rios goals, and he's obviously a favorite to those of us who have been around since the USL days. But I guess one of the highlights for what we've talked about, what we spent a lot of time talking to John about when he was on the show previously, was all those goals in added time. And so there was just one the other day. It didn't quite matter as much as some of them previously, but there have been 14 added time goals at the end of a game since Nashville started playing professionally over the last 4 years. And we all wondered what that magic would be like if it was going to be gone after USL, because there were 3 straight home games that ended with an added time goal during that USL run. How is it for you as a commentator? We talked about this with John. You don't know that it's coming, but you know that if it does come, it has to be a really good call. The Gendarme Cadiz one last year against Orlando is the first one I think of from last year. So when you prepare for those sorts of moments in games, are you pre-gaming it a little bit? Are you kind of trying to fix it in your head if the goal's coming, or is it just clearly just right out of that moment?
I've always gone pretty much spontaneous. I don't generally think about having anything too much in the back of my mind. I mean, you hear me sometimes at kickoff. I would have prepared a little, something around the kind of soccer time in Tennessee type thing, and I think it's something that's worthy in the news. And we did it with Josh Allen and the slip up with Buffalo the other week and things like that. So yes, things like that I might prepare that in advance and think that's just a humorous quip to kind of get the commentary underway. But no, for kind of match winning moments, I like to be there in the moment, because you don't necessarily know. Admittedly, 14 times now Nashville have proved that it is coming, but you don't necessarily know in the commentary it's coming. I think my emphasis would be on the build-up. Can you build the drama? Can you inject the drama using your voice and your words to get that audience into a place where, if they're watching at home, they're on the edge of their seat. They're thinking, we've built up, and now we get the final moment of the drama. It's almost like on Sunday Night Football, I think, when they go to the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter, if it's a close one, they go to the final break and they effectively say, are coming back for the final act. And sometimes stoppage time for Nashville is kind of like the final act. So here we go into stoppage time. And with all the substitutes we have in soccer these days, often now we're doing 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes of stoppage time. So, 90 minutes now isn't quite what it used to be. You may get a minute tagged on in the old days. Now suddenly, 90 minutes signals we're almost into this last phase of the game now, this last potentially 5-6 minutes. And I enjoy just trying to build that drama, as I'm sure, the likes of John do as well. And so that we hit the notes, when it goes in. The difference with the radio and the TV side would be often you build that drama, the guy scores the goal. And actually, sometimes the key thing at that point for a commentator on TV is to just not say anything at all and let the fans ride it then. And other times it might be just about saying the killer word, one or two things. I think Luke Harkinson scores to win it against Toronto earlier in the season, the 3-2, and I think I literally just said, oh, it's Luke Harkinson, it's 3-2. And I didn't say anything else. You didn't need to say anything else because the backline were telling you that the drama had finally engulfed in or reached a climax.
Well, I thought Valair had a question, so we'll edit that. But so I think that's a pretty good note to start to wrap things up. But before we do, we've got some questions that we really want to make sure you answer. We'd really like to make sure you answer them honestly. And we put Taylor Washington through it a few weeks ago. And so it's your turn to be on the veritable hot seat, and I'll let Valair take it away.
It's going to be a quick one. Okay. English breakfast or American breakfast?
Sorry, guys, English.
I might agree with you on that one, by the way. Favorite American city?
You can't say Nashville.
Yeah.
Oh, aside from Nashville? Okay. Well, I would say Chicago.
That's a good one. Favorite sport to cover?
Oh, it's soccer.
Okay. That's fair. And then least favorite sport to cover?
I've covered race walking. Have you ever watched that?
What? Hold on.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Heel toe.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, the race walking community, if any of them were watching, fantastic people. But I mean, it's not one of the easiest sports to commentate on when you're watching two sets of both the men and the women doing 50-kilometer race walks. They're doing 25 laps of a 2-kilometer circuit on a street in China that has a cinema at one end and a post office at the other. It's not a lot. And you're commentating it on your own for 5 hours.
That is some skill, Tony. That is some skill.
I really wish I knew Jamie Watson when I did the race walking. The time would fly by.
This sounds like an advertisement for getting more stories out there. That's what that sounds like. I don't know what the stats would be like for race walking. But...
Oh,
all right. A few more questions. A few more questions. We gotta get it going. Best meal you've ever had, if you have one.
Best meal what? Ever?
Yeah, like best thing you've ever had.
Oh, I had a taster menu at a restaurant in the island of Mallorca a few years ago. And the chef put on a taster menu and we had everything from fish, meat. It was the best meal of my life.
That's amazing. Two more I got for you. A player other than Dax you would like to have on the booth? Current player.
I would say, I think, there's a few contenders for this, but I just think Jack Mayer and Alistair Johnston are two fantastic young men and great ambassadors and representatives, both for their background and for the way they've come through and the way they're achieving in their careers. They both speak so well. I always think of it in terms of, who's a good talker. There's multiple candidates, to be honest, but I think Alistair Johnston would be good to have as a co-com. I don't want him to be injured, but if he had to come in the booth one week, yeah.
I think if you had Alistair and Jack at the same time, I think that's the preferable one, because if the game's boring, things aren't going well, you can just have them making fun of each other for about 5 minutes and then pick it up when something happens.
That's very true. And I mean, the game that we had Dax and the squabble on the field against New York City, of course, I didn't have anybody in the booth with me. So at that point, I just said, well, let's leave it to them to get on with it.
And then lastly, can you tell everybody listening, what do Nashville SC fans get from Taco Bell when the team wins?
Hey, when Nashville SC wins, Nashville SC fans, you will receive a free Chalupa Supreme from participating Middle Tennessee area Taco Bells. Go to tacobell.com for more information. Enjoy your tacos responsibly, captains. No, I think I'm merging them together now.
Thank you so much for that. I told Clay when he said you're locked in, I said, I'm going to get him to say chalupa on our show before he leaves.
Hey, it's chalupa time in Tennessee.
That's it.
I think that's the best way to end this. So as everyone heads to Taco Bell to get their chalupas, we will head to break, and we'll be back with the final segment of Pharmaceutical Soccer right here on 102.5 The Game.